A network and a community isn't just about support. Support's all well and good, but you also need to be challenged. The typical path just was never going to work for me. What was scary is all the responsibility and fell on your shoulders. You could kind of write your own rule book and do it.
Hey, Hollis, welcome to the show.
Awesome. Thanks for having me.
Now, full disclosure, I don't want anyone to think of anything other than this, is that you are the co-founder of Baby Bathwater. We're going to be going into that. And I am very honored and proud because we've known each other for years. We've chatted for years. Ever since Blue Fishing came out, we know a lot of the same people. Jason Gaynard, Cameron Howard, all the usual genius suspects there. And this year, I'm very proud to say that on the 10th anniversary, I'm actually going to be attending and speaking at your event in Hilton Head. Now, I never have people onto the podcast to kind of like promote a major event, although we'll put all the links for Baby Bathwater beneath this. But what I found so interesting about you, and we haven't connected closely, is you love skiing, you love your family, and you love building a community. I want to hit with that one first. I know you're an entrepreneur at heart, but why is so much of your energy focused on communities, and why do you think they're more important today than ever?
Yeah, no, great question. And I think we're all very multifaceted, and we see the internet version of people, and it's like that one piece of content you always see because that's usually what they're selling. And oddly, I think it's funny, the stuff I share is when I'm actually just feeling elated, and that's usually when I'm skiing or hanging out with my kids or on the river or whatever. But, you know, entrepreneurship has pretty much been my key to being the me that I am from a very early age. I've told this a handful of times because community is the reason it worked for me to find entrepreneurship. Was like early days in school, being really dyslexic and having issues with school. Like the typical path of go to school, make good grades, just was never going to work for me. I had a huge problem with authority. I sucked at learning and memorizing and those things. I found the entrepreneurship thing, and that gave me a lot of confidence when I started making more than my teachers with my landscaping company before I could drive. And what was cool about it is you could kind of write your own rule book and do it. What was scary is all the responsibility and all the decisions and all the things you made like fell on your shoulders versus at a job, you do what you say, what someone else tells you to do. If it doesn't work out, you'll get another job, whatever. When you take a loan out for a business or you sell something to a client, you're the one who has to deliver on it. In my early days, and I believe this is how we end up getting connected, I just spent so much time at conferences and meeting people, not in the content session per se, but in the lobby and at the bar, and often usually days after. There's conferences I went to. I remember it was the first mass control ever that I met two people who became two of my best buddies, and we stayed for 2 weeks after the conference in that hotel where it was because we just hit it off and just canceled other things. But the real reason is shit hits the fan pretty regularly as an entrepreneur, and you want someone who gets you to be able to call and vent to get relationship like advice from them, how you're dealing with an employee or a hire or a big move. It all can be quite scary. And like, I feel so privileged that in my phone, I've got this Rolodex that any situation that comes up, I can usually make a phone call and we can skip the small talk and go straight to like, hey, I need to vent about this idea. I need to talk about this. And that makes it not feel lonely. It makes you feel supported. It makes you feel like you have like wind in your sails. When, you see a lot of stuff on the bigger kind of main bro science podcast stuff about, mental health and things like that right now, it's because people do freak out, and it means a lot to how am I going to make payroll, or I did that decision I make sense. I think having a community that understands you, which we don't always get from our, say, family and other people who might not get our crazy things that light us up and how we do it. So it's really just been a very natural evolution of how I had my first couple successful businesses were from making really good friends hanging out, having drinks in lobbies of crappy hotels. And all of a sudden I had an idea. I talk about it. I got to connect you to this guy, or validating that idea, or telling me I'm an idiot not to do it because they did that once and I shouldn't do it, and saving me all that headache. And I think there's just a lot of value in that, a lot of value gets placed on books and courses and things like that, but not as much on just true relationships that are one-to-one and in a community where you're not trying to sell stuff to each other. You're truly just trying to support each other, and you want the best for each other.
Now, there's a lesson and an education in learning who to talk to. Now, you mentioned the family. Families can quite often be the toughest conversations. I know when I would go back to England and I would meet all my family and all my cousins, quite often you would have to dilute your conversations because they all thought you were mad. I remember for a long time, my mum, and this is no word of a lie, used to think I was a drug dealer, because when I explained to her that I was a concierge for very famous people, she found it easier to think that I was a drug dealer than doing that.
Oh, for sure.
And they just couldn't understand. You realized that you needed to surround yourself in a room with people that could escalate you, and that the questions they were asking you were to challenge you in order to be able to make them come true, or to be able to help you avoid the roadblocks. How did you first learn who to listen to?
Yeah, it's a great question. A bit of trial and error. I'm sure sometimes I get advice from someone, or realize someone was trying to sell me something and it would fall flat. Like you'd see that they were moving you down a path. I just learned my lesson. We just spent an hour talking, and in result, you're just trying to sell me something I don't need, or you were giving me advice to sound smart. But I would say we all have our unique strengths and weaknesses, and both of my parents were psychologists. I've always been really into asking questions and just super curious about people. Like, I remember before I had my family, I would go around and I just talked to some of the homeless people here in town, because some of them did it by choice, and I asked how they got here. Some were successful in the past. Like, I've always been quite curious. But over time, there is a sense you get from people if they are in, we'll say specifically in this business networking kind of conference world, if they're there for a specific transactional reason and they're like a business development kind of missionary there, or they're truly there because they enjoy the longer game. I call it like playing in that third level, where it doesn't matter if there's anything, they enjoy helping and sharing their stories and lessons that they've learned. Like, you can pick up on it really fast once you do it. If you're a young boy or girl trying to talk to the other sex for a while, you learn pretty quick once you knock on enough doors and figure out how it reacts. I put in my 10,000 hours of that as a young teenager at events pretty early, because it was how I learned, it was how I connected. And now over time, I've just developed a really good spidey sense for it. You asking that question makes me kind of want to break down and figure out the type of questions that happen probably naturally in that. And usually I try not to talk about myself at all and ask as much about other people at the beginning. And I find out in this almost tug of war if they're naturally inclined to try to be helpful, or if I let them talk about themselves and all of a sudden they never asked another question back or tried to create that reciprocal flow, you kind of know who you're talking to. And if it's a good relationship to be in, where they want to be in a supportive one versus a taking one.
Now, you said at the early stages that everyone's Instagram profiles are perfect, but the shit hits the fan often and regular, and usually when you don't expect it. What I also liked what you said was about your spidey senses. Now, we can often look at something and our eyes are telling us that it looks good, and we're hearing it and it sounds good, but it is fake. And of course, now with AI, CGI, we can't trust our eyes, we can't trust our ears, which brings us back to those spidey senses, our gut. And our gut is incredibly intelligent and smart. And I've learned to live on it. A friend of mine is a Le Mans winning racing driver, and he says the racing driver learns how to trust his ass, because his ass is the first thing that feels anything going on in the car. Not the steering wheel, not the neck brace, not the helmet. It's his ass. And if it's feeling a little tingle, something's going on somewhere and he's got to trust it.
Yeah.
And so you say about trusting your spidey senses. Were there any kind of big mistakes you made in your life that made you go, hang on a minute, I'm trusting the wrong thing?
Oh, for sure. That the too good to be true quote is pretty real, and especially when interacting with people in this like entrepreneurial world. Spending time early on in that kind of marketing world where there was a lot of things that could happen. They all seemed too good to be true, and they were very too polished of salespeople, and you could tell when they were doing damaging omissions and things like that on purpose versus being a real human. And I think being able to read, much as you do, probably quickly, your ass, your gut, whatever, when you see someone's social feed, you're like, oh, you're showing me what you want me to see. In real life, I think those same things can happen pretty quickly. And, any time that I have someone who says, if you get with this person, it's just going to solve all the problems, I've actually learned that's the opposite of what's going to happen almost every single time, because there is no quick path. Like, it's the slower compounded efforts, and everyone's good at a few things, but no one is amazing at everything. And, I would say in hiring over the last few years, the first friend that is referred by someone is generally where I've made a lot of costly mistakes versus going, okay, let's make that a candidate and let's put 3 people up against it that we don't know who aren't referrals. Because I think as entrepreneurs, we can be wanting the fastest path with the least amount of resistance and the least amount of work, because we have 100 things we're working on. And if it's, I need this vendor or I need to hire this person, you're going to take the first referral someone has because I trust that person. They know me. They know my business. It's going to work. When now I've learned to like take a breath and go, awesome, let's build a role around that and interview a few people or interview a few vendors. Up until a minute before this, I was meeting with one of my teammates who essentially is wanting to hire a vendor that was recommended by a client. And I said, great, I want you to spend the rest of the day doing the job that we're going to hire them for so that when we get on that call, we understand it. And don't just trust that person who said, hey, hire this person because they'll fix that marketing problem you have or whatever. Like, we actually have to understand what we are doing before we get in relationship with people and trust so quickly, references and recommendations. Just like this, you're recommending the Baby Bathwater is a great thing, and I'm recommending that you're going to be a great person to listen there. I still want people to do their own vetting, to take their own time with it. I think we're very quick to trust off of social cues, and people need to trust their ass a little bit better, because we're all so unique. The way I want to do something is very different than the way you want to do something, and we have to trust that. So, to boil it into a lesson, I think it's taking that extra time to really vet out any relationship that you get into and compare it to a couple. When you're dating, you don't just take the first girl that comes along. You're going to date a couple and see the patterns and see what lands. And, that is a lesson as someone who wants to move quick, get off that project, move to the next task. I've really had to slow down and get much better at that. And, a lot of that's from reading a lot of books since I had these 2 young kids that are the opposite of what I want to hear. And that's been ingrained a lot lately.
I'm interrupting this podcast for 35 seconds to give you more value. If you are an ambitious entrepreneur looking for the opportunity in everything you come across, don't just listen to this podcast. Imagine taking part in these conversations every week. Imagine having a new network of creative and disruptive entrepreneurs to support and push you into becoming the person you can be. With this high level and exclusive community, it exists. Head to simsdistillery.com to learn more. So you mentioned earlier about everything falling down onto the shoulders of an entrepreneur. I did a podcast, I don't know how long ago, a couple of years ago, about the one of the biggest downfalls of any entrepreneur is success, because all of a sudden you have to do the things that was not your unicorn. You may be absolutely fantastic at painting, but the second you sell a painting, you've now got to do the invoices, the tax, the inventory. There's all these things that come on you. And as entrepreneurs, as we grow, there's this classic kind of, well, I can't teach you because the amount of time it takes me to teach you, I may as well do it myself. without realizing that we're inadequate to do what we were going to teach you. So I very much like the idea you have of not becoming an expert at it, but understanding what you need done by the person you're going to employ to bring into it. Now, you realize very much about the power of community. Were you needing that before you actually invented Baby Bathwater?
It's a great question, and the answer is yes, but I didn't do it intentionally. Like we never sat down. Me and Michael, my business partner, when we started, we had separate companies for a decade, and we were just guys who hung out together and collaborated, supported each other in those businesses. But we always had the same spidey sense and gut feel for the people that we would connect with at these conferences, who we'd collaborate with, who we'd share with, and we'd do that. And we hit a similar point in inflection in life where the things we did worked and we weren't really needed day to day anymore. We hit that kind of beautiful spot that you think you want, but then you go mad crazy because this is working. And the real intention was to figure out what we wanted to do next with our own separate lives and just build the community we wanted without having to go to crappy conferences at crappy hotels with crappy food. And we're like, let's just do that twice a year and we won't have to go to events anymore. There was no plan to make money. There was no plan we just wanted to break even on our efforts of putting the people together so it could support future ideas. The unexpected thing that happened was people really liked it. And the same 50 people came for the first 2 years. Then we added 25. It was 75 and 75. So the first 2 years, it was just 2 events a year at the ski resort I had invested in. And it was just a wonderful time. And the word curated is used a lot, but it was curated of the people I wanted to spend time with. I appreciated their stories, their knowledge, their network. And I literally wanted to have drinks with them and ski and wake surf and hang out and listen to music and have fun. Like that was what gave me energy. And it was almost doing the reverse of where someone comes up with a business idea and then goes out and talks about that at conferences. We're like, we don't know what we want to do next, so let's build a community we want to be able to, talk to our ideas about and get support from. Let's do that first while we take a little break from being business guys. Then it started to grow. Then we had to hire someone to help us. Then we had to hire more people to help us. And then they were like, hey, we should have a membership with this so we could talk in between events and build that out. And then that was, I'd say the first 2 years were just an idea to have fun. And then these last 8, there's been the membership and there's been events. And all of a sudden I was working on it pretty much full time while having a lot of side projects and things like that. And so the answer was, yes, it is what I needed. It was not my intention to make it into a business, where I do think that is what I'm enjoying laying in bed thinking about, because there isn't a model that I'm following. Like I'm not following a typical mastermind model or a conference model or whatever. And that creative effort is the part I enjoy. There are, as you mentioned, once you get something to work, you don't get to do some of the fun parts anymore. And there are things that I don't enjoy that are straight business. I was on the phone getting lines of credit because I have to put $1 million deposits down for these events because they're very expensive and things. And I don't enjoy that kind of business activity, but it has to be done now that we're in this kind of scaling phase. What I really enjoy is literally, and some people would hate this part of it, but I like making the matchings of who needs to meet each other. I like picking out the music. I like working with the food. But like that for me is, if I was a musician in my side, hobby that I want to do, I'm getting to do that as part of the business. And so I think that's why this is the first and only thing I've stuck with for more than 3 years ever in my history of entrepreneurship, because it also serves a creative outlet I enjoy. And the ability to do it differently and without a guru face is really this mission, where it's actually about the peers, versus most of these have a figurehead who is the main person and it's their lifestyle or their business success that you're following. I'm building the people I want to learn from. I've been courting this one guy who's coming to Hilton Head for years. He's, in a daily rounding error of his profits, could make more than I'll probably ever make in my lifetime. And it lives an amazing life, but he's into the idea of this community and supporting it. And now I get to have him learn. And I always said the hardest part when we started, I called 100 people who get paid to go to events and ask them to pay to go to an event. And it was like, oh, well, now I get to go be with peers versus on stage to many people, and it'll be an equal value exchange. And there's no coming and leaving. Everybody stays the whole time. And you're going to play out. And you don't know who you're sitting next to. It could be, we did a good job of trying to get rid of the status that happens in a lot of these community events where you see the guy who paid for like 10 little things on his badge, or the sponsors and the guys who show up with the fancy car and then pull to the steak dinner to the side and create hierarchies. It was all inclusive. We do the housing, we do the food, we do the booze. Everyone comes, and it's like a summer camp with really nice shit for 4 days in a nice place. And I got guys with family offices who've had multiple exits sitting next to someone who maybe has like a 7-figure agency and 3 employees. But if we interviewed and we picked them to be there, I saw real value in something they've learned in life and what they can bring to the table here. And it's more about them connecting than myself or my partner or anyone on my team, delivering anything to them. It's more about that peer-to-peer connection.
Now, everyone knows, obviously, because it's my podcast, I've got a similar within Sims Distillery and the Speakeasy. One thing that I wanted to ask you was, COVID has taught a lot of people to be worse communicators and connectors than they ever were. And I was having a conversation with someone the other day. There's actually a medical term for it now, social hangover. That's where people never got to kind of like hang around with each other. Now they're hanging around with each other. Now, I'm a great believer that together, and you were saying about this before, having a phone call, when the shit hits the fan, the smartest thing any entrepreneur can understand is to realize that somebody else has got the answer and someone else has probably been through it. And you've just got to go through your Rolodex to find that one person that goes, I know exactly where you are. I had a $750,000 tax bill by selling my company terribly. I don't think you can sell a company badly. I did.
Oh, you can?
I got, yeah, I know. I earned that degree. It cost me $750,000. But then I was like crapping my pants until I phoned up one person. He went, yeah, speak to this person, he'll help. And it was like a walk in the park. It was like they were teaching me how to kind of like toast. It was just ridiculous how you can actually get that information, that clarity and that comfort based on the room you're in. That's good. We both know that. Both me and you are advocates of having the right people around you. But today, because of the social presence, because of us showing our prettier side, because of us showing what we want to expose, it can be a lot more uncomfortable, and that imposter syndrome is getting greater. Now, you said you actually chat and interview, and I know you do this, you actually interview every single applicant before you accept them for Baby Bathwater. I know that for a fact. I do the same within the Sims Distillery and Speakeasy. But what would you suggest to the people that are outside going, okay, I know I need to be in a community. It may not be either of these guys' communities, but how is it best for them to show up to get the most out of a community? And obviously, the first thing is leaving the ego at the door. But what do you see as the common mistakes when people turn up at these groups?
Yeah, no, that's a great question. And it's funny you said the ego at the door, because I wish for the streamline of the business, I could find out how the ego checks through an online application, but there's just no way. And that's you have to do the gut feel call and figure it out. And I now have a guy who's been in the company for 7 years, and he can figure it out on a call, but we don't have a line of questioning because it's different for every person. And, one thing that I've been doing purposely unique with Baby Bathwater is having a lot of different industry people in the room versus a single industry. And so I do think, to that question, if you're either starting out or just have trouble socially and have that hangover kind of feeling and anxiety around it or whatever, it's figuring out why are you doing it, because it is a resource. It's your time, it's your energy. When you engage with anyone, you're literally giving them resources and trying to create that energetic flow. When you're in one of just a single industry, I actually find it to be pretty hard. Like the mastermind rooms, when I was early on in internet marketing, were tough because there was a posturing. It was almost like the internet. There's a posturing that happened, and you could see the people. this goes back to even an earlier question you asked of who you would want to connect with. I could see the people who sandbagged themselves and they would humbly explain very high level things. And I was always attracted to that because I knew there was a lot more under it because they could usually explain it pretty simple. It wasn't a brag. They weren't trying to be the smartest person in the room and show off because usually they were making up for some kind of, it's the whole thing like guys with a big truck have a little whatever, like that kind of thing, you would pick up on it. But I think assessing where you are in the world, like my life has shifted a lot in the last 3 years from having 2 young kids, buying a house. Like before that, when I started this, I lived in a van. I measured my life success on how much time I spent skiing out of a helicopter. And those were like the 2 things I really cared about was partying, going to live shows and skiing. And I enjoyed the creativity of entrepreneurship. Now I've been going into rooms where people are talking about things that I used to, when my dad would try to talk to me about compound interest and doing these things to save my life, I would just shoo it off. I'm literally consuming that. I'm putting myself in those rooms and I'm trying to be the humble person who knows nothing about it to learn. And now I can pick up my phone when I actually had a very similar situation happen. I had an investment that I thought I would just get all the money back, didn't take taxes into account, all these things. The lesson I would have had to pay was huge, but I was able to pick up the phone because there's these 3 or 4 guys that I talked to at a conference I would have never gone to had I not had some intention of, I need to become more financially literate because I now have kids. And these guys, they could just spit off the information, the connections to who I need to work with without trying. But I was valuable to them because I was bringing they were like business guys who never had done entrepreneurial things. And so they got value from me. So I think, what the unlock there is like, where can you be valuable and own it, but also know where you can't be and don't try to be that way. Like we always said that the people who come to Baby Bathwater are competent, but they know what they know, but they also know what they don't know. I get very weary, and I think it becomes almost a nervous tick that people get if they have some social anxiety of trying to have answers to everything, where probably the easiest thing is, unless you're sure that what you're going to, expand upon in a conversation with people in these kind of settings, you don't know it, play dumb and call that card because if you don't know it, it's only going to come back to bite you. But if you do have some expertise and something to glean, which everybody does, if they've been alive, walking around, eating, breathing, drinking on this earth, they've learned lessons. But think about those more clearly and how you can help. Because even the people who are maybe further along in one area of life are lacking in other. No one ever has all those balls balanced. I think there's the Coca-Cola CEO talks about the 8 balls that everyone's juggling. Some are rubber, some are glass, but they're never balanced. And, right now I may be more focused on some physical health and financial health stuff, but I was way more balanced in experience and fun and that vigor, and another thing that comes in seasons. So being mindful of who you're talking to and where they're at, I think is really key because no one is out of reach for anybody because there's always something out of balance. And if you have some value, it's there. And usually people who are successful love to share and help. I find it easier to talk to really, really successful people than I do to those who are nervously trying to have an answer to every question, have the guard up, because they've usually learned how to have that tone, a little bit more clearly.
I'm going to go into that in a little bit more, but before we do that, how can people find out about Baby Bathwater?
You just go to babybathwater.com and there's information and you can kind of check out some stuff about the events. And if it does look like a fit, there's an application page. We're not right for everybody, but we're really right for the right niche. We're very kind of niche in that. And it doesn't really matter what industry people are in. It is very much focused on people who already are in that kind of growth stage in business. So we talk a lot about life and all the other things that come with being a founder, but you want to know what you're selling. You want to you're not figuring out what the first thing that you're bringing to market is, and usually have a team and, you're in that grow and scale phase. So really bad if you have a board of directors and, you have to move slowly and you have no control over your business, but also your use of time, money, and resources. If you're not already probably doing $1 million minimum and have at least, 3 or 4 people on your team there, I'd say like the average kind of people in a group are in like the 5 to 25 million, control most of their company, and they aren't there to get business. They're there because they know that this is wild and crazy, and they don't know when that shit bomb's going to fly off each day. And now they have people they can call to help them with it. But it takes time to build a relationship so that they pick up the call. And that's really, the purpose of it, is to have that supportive network. And one thing, Adam Grant said this really well, was a network and a community isn't just about support. Support's all well and good, but you also need to be challenged. And one thing I love is if I go to one of these events or I'm in an online group talking about something I'm doing and I show up to the next thing and I haven't done it, I expect to be challenged on that as well. And so it's not as much accountability as like true, like loving support, which also involves challenging people on, hey, you said you were going to do this thing, you didn't do it, or why are you just continuing to punt that? And I think people who need that kind of support have reached a level where they don't need the day-to-day simple tasks done. They know how to eat the frog, but they need that support of a multitude of different knowledges and backgrounds and stories to support them when they may make decisions that they're unsure of from time to time and have unexpected things pop up on a daily basis. I think the more you grow, the more random stuff just pops up every day that you don't know how to deal with.
You say about showing up. You just flippantly said, oh, and then I show up and I'm challenged on it. I think that's one of the first things you've got to do with any community, mastermind, anywhere that you got to show up. I remember when I first turned up, I had that massive imposter syndrome, and I walked in with two guys that owned eight-figure businesses. We've all met them. They don't. They're basically broke, but they're spilling the bullshit just to kind of like make themselves feel better in the room. And they weren't asking the questions. And I remember at the time, I was in a pivotal point in my business and I didn't know where to go. So I had a lot more questions than I had answers for. And I started asking these questions. And you're right. The people that have been through the same pain, they want to help. And just by me asking this, and I remember talking to these guys at the end of the night, and we were having drinks. I was like, "Oh, what did you get out of today?" And they were like, "Well, I like so and so's conversation, and oh yeah, I like that talk that was on stage." The stage is the least powerful part of any community, and I'm shitting on myself there because I keynote all over the world. But a good event is the attendance and the community first, and who's up on stage, third or fourth. When you actually show up, have you ever had any of those imposter syndromes? Because I know you've been to a lot of masterminds, you've been around a lot of people, but and a lot of people can now think it's confidence. And I think confidence comes from experience. And 9 times out of 10, that experience is gained by something going wrong that's given you that experience and education. But how would you suggest someone turns up and shows up when they step into the room at a Baby Bathwater event?
Yeah, no, it's a great question. And it's so funny you use the imposter syndrome word, because it's like a law of gravity that we get an email from somebody who's new and coming saying they're dealing with this, like almost an anxiety about that. And they use the word imposter syndrome coming. And it's almost something you get an internal chuckle about because it's going to happen. It's usually from one of the more successful people who's coming, and it's quite interesting. But it's kind of cliche to just like be yourself and own it, because the thing we try to produce through just leading through the behavior is just taking off the costume. Like, we're not acting any different as the host as I would if I was meeting you on the street at any given time. Like, and I still I only speak for about 5 minutes per day, and that's at dinner just to explain what's going on the next day. And I hate it. I pretty much black out, up there. And so I haven't figured out how to get over that piece, because I'm looking at the people in the room who paid to be there and are interacting and they're doing their thing, and it makes me nervous as hell. And I've been doing it for 10 years, and it's still, I write my little notes on my phone and I never stick to them. I always go off and say some random shit and curse too much. But I had a lady come up to me at this last one we just did in New York, and she was like, I didn't get it the first time I came. I was trying so hard to like learn this thing from content and do this, and like I treated it in a different way. I realized I just needed to literally connect with people and ask them questions. And if you want to think about it in like a more tactical way so that you can be more authentic, is I think so many people, when they're in their day-to-day sitting at their desk making their business plans, why am I coming to one of these things? There's a linear, logical reason. The same reason that people see who's talking, they use that logic of why to come. It's more about getting installed into real humans' brains who are authentically wanting to help other people. So like, knowing more about me is way more powerful than me trying to sell you something or trying to get a deal done with you, because you're out in the world doing your thing, and you may run into a conversation in a few days and be like, oh my gosh, you got to connect with Hollis. He has X, Y, and Z. That's the thing. That's like 3-4 levels past sticking to like a single transaction. And sometimes people need the logic of, why should I just try to give and answer questions and do that when I've paid money, I'm away from my family, I'm doing all this. Like, the payoff is so big, but it's like an Easter egg. You know how like Tesla has the Easter eggs hidden inside the car, you find them when you crack the code. There's like these Easter eggs you don't know when they're going to deliver. And if you want to look at life like a game, the more valuable you are, it just happens in absolute spades when you do it. And I see those people who literally just, their intention to show up is to try to have a genuine conversation with as many people as have, and ask them questions like, what's going on in your world, and get through the small bullshit as fast as possible. They don't really care. Like, you may ask where they live or, what they do, but it's like, what's keeping you up at night? And, is it business? Is it family? What's going on there? And you'd be surprised how all of a sudden time disappears. The two quotes I get back from people a lot are, it felt like competitive giving. Like, I couldn't even find out what anyone did because everyone was trying to be competitively better at giving advice and helping. Like, let me connect you to this person right now, because you said that bothered you. And the other one is, if you've ever gotten on an airplane and you were, partied the night before, or you had a bunch of work to do and you had an intention of what you're going to do, but then you sat next to someone and before you knew it, the plane landed. And you're like, oh shit, I just had the best conversation ever. It just, added energy to me and possibly changed some part of the trajectory of my life. Like, that is sort of what we're chasing to have happen in a small period of time. And then that can obviously continue into a longer period.
I think it was Alex Sharfin that turned around and said, imposters don't get imposter syndrome. So having that kind of concern, having that kind of apprehension, that's a good thing. That is actually a very good thing. Hollis, I've enjoyed this conversation. I am desperately, eagerly looking forward to actually being at your 10-year anniversary. It's in Hilton Head, isn't it?
Yeah, Hilton Head Island, South Carolina. Yep.
What's the date?
That is October 21st through 24th. Yeah.
All right. Okay. And we've already announced that I'm going to be there and I'm going to be speaking. If that doesn't put you off, you really need to check it out. We're going to put the link below again so you can actually find out about it. Hollis, thank you so much for building a community that so many people need. And I look forward to seeing you in Hilton Head.
100%. Thanks for having me on the show.
Bye. Hey, thanks for listening to the podcast. You know what to do. If you love it, share, subscribe, but more than anything, do something with it. And remember, life's too short to play it safe, so disrupt, connect, and grow. See you next time.